to welcome you all to the International Trade Forum today, and to our international panelists, good morning. To the people in the UK, good day, and Europe, and to those in the Far East, in India, good evening. I'd like you first of all briefly to introduce yourselves. Perhaps I could start with you, Steve. A very quick introduction, then we'll get on to the body of the event.
Yeah, good morning everyone. I'm Steve Gardner-Collins. I'm Director of Visit Gloucestershire and I'm Sales Director of the Hatton Collection.
Humphrey.
Good morning, Humphrey Henry, Customs Compliance. I support companies in all regulatory parts of importing and exporting.
And Marcus.
Hello, good morning. I'm Marcus Broix of Trade with Europe, and we help UK companies to trade with Europe and the rest of the world, and vice versa, European companies to trade with the UK.
Sam.
Good morning, I'm Sam Holliday. I'm the Development Manager for the Federation of Small Businesses for Gloucestershire and the West of England. And for those that don't know it, the FSB is the biggest business representation group in the country.
Thank you, Sam. John.
Yes, good morning everybody. I'm Chief Executive of Taste of the West, the regional food group for the southwest of England. That's the 6 counties, Gloucester, Wiltshire and everything westwards to the Isles of Scilly. And we have about 1,000 members in this region, which we represent. So looking forward to pushing ahead on export now after this.
And Claire.
Hi, I'm Claire Thayers. I wear many hats, but for the purpose of today, it's talking about provenance and the importance of provenance. I work for a company called Happily, which is all about a digital platform which enables producers to have a QR code to tell their story. So it's marketing not only in the UK, but export as well.
Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Baer. I'm the CEO of a company called Personal Cities. We're based in Washington, D.C. and very interested in international trade opportunities that have arisen due to COVID and beyond. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Sandra. Manan.
Good morning. I'm Maman Chako from South Africa. I'm a director for Kairali. We are primarily an exporting company and I'm also a grower of berries and exporter.
Thank you, Manan. Guy.
Yeah, hi, good morning. My name is Guy Timpson. I am, like Claire, I've got many hats, but I'm owner of a company called Channel Force, which is all to do with email lead generation for businesses both here and overseas. And also I am sponsorship director of the Bristol Balloon Fiesta.
Thank you, Guy. Just to introduce myself, I'm Roger McCrill from Sabre UK, and we are a company that assists companies and facilitate companies moving particularly into India and to China. And I think with that, let's start the panel moving. I think with the help of the panel today, we'll explore in the food and drink sector and how we might encourage SMEs in the region to develop export opportunities. So Steve, could I ask you the first question to start off with the panel? How is the UK perceived in the food and drink market? Or what food and drink markets may be open to exporters from this region?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so in terms of the popularity of our food and drink in the region, in the area, we've certainly become famed for our kind of Cotswold branded products and our true Gloucester branded products, our Gloucester cheese, cheddar, our gin that's become sanitizer of late. We hope that that becomes gin on the production line again soon. We all need it. And certainly through our abilities to shop online a lot more significantly than even a year ago, a lot of our products here in Gloucestershire are now available on Amazon even, and can trade internationally with companies producing like rum even in the area now, that's now available to buy on Amazon. So I think it's become it's always been in our history to trade internationally, but I think that this new online world that we're in, it really allows us to share and talk about all of our food that's produced in the area, from our beef to our milk to our cheese and everything. We can really celebrate that and actually reinvent ourselves in an international market, really, without having to worry about borders in some way, because it's all done online. So we don't, in a way, it's kind of taken the person away and made the product more important. And actually we can trade internationally a lot easier.
Okay. John, do you want to make any comment at all?
Yeah, I think that's actually quite interesting. From my perspective, if I tell this little story, Roger and I were chatting the other day, but it's a little bit of research that we undertook a few years ago, where we developed our regional brand into an outward-facing brand, because we felt quite strongly that the products that were being perceived overseas were not the quality products that our consumers were liking here. So what was that the same overseas? So we developed our outward facing brand. We took it to several markets abroad in Europe, Austria, and Netherlands. We took it to Singapore, and we tested the market in terms of our brand, what it represented, the products that we were representing at trade missions and trade shows and so on. And the perception overseas was, and the reception we got was absolutely fantastic. It was absolutely everything that you would go to a local food fair and be wowed and inspired by. They would seem to be wowed and inspired as well. So we were getting away from the perception of UK food and drink, which was beset by problems in the supply chain in the 80s and 90s, which the world knew about, but was categorized by, shall we say, the heritage products that were put onto the market at that particular time. Here we were coming to the market with something new, something different, innovative products with innovative stories from our region. So provenance was playing a massive part in that, and I think the world market has changed. And so, the question is how's the UK perceived in the food and drink market? It's perceived now, I think, in terms of quality products, and I think it's also perceived overseas in terms of our professionalism, that we've upped our game in the supply chain now from those rather sorry days in the 80s and 90s. And I think that we are now perceived to be the purveyor of top quality products from top quality professional businesses.
Thank you, John. Let's have a look overseas. Sandra, what's your views about the food coming in from the UK?
I was trying to, earlier today, I was trying to find some statistics about the American perceptions of food from the UK. And I don't have the stats, and maybe someone on our panel does, but I'm telling you, there's a huge interest in sort of cultivating sort of this British cuisine and sharing it in the US. I mean, everything British is positive for the most part from the US perspective. So I think there are opportunities for export that maybe need to be accelerated, if you will, because of what Steve just said about online opportunity. I do think, there's an interesting thing going on in the United States that has to do with how we are continuing to build affinity with restaurant goers, with diners that, have this yearning for, I'd really like to have some great Italian food, or I'd really like to have a delicious British scone. So I think the whole idea about where the opportunity is definitely online, but definitely in need of more promotion. The U.S. is hungry for that, no pun intended, and I think there's an opportunity to do more of that. Post-COVID and beyond.
Yeah, you're quite right. Looking at the US statistics, the US is the third largest market for the UK. However, it's still relatively small in overall terms, so yes, an opportunity. Claire, do you think you could just comment on the provenance side of things? I mean, provenance seems to be a major sort of opportunity that comes forward.
Yes, Happily was actually created, for those who don't know, to create a level playing field for our producers and farmers in this country, because often if you went into a restaurant or into a butcher's and you asked where the meat was from, they might say, oh, it's from south of here. And then if you probe a little bit deeper, you'll suddenly find out, yes, it's Hereford steaks, but Hereford the breed, rather than from Herefordshire. So there's a lot of lies that are told in food and drink, and some of the export that comes in may be, in quotes, a little bit lesser quality than some of our locally produced meats, for example. So Happily was about enabling a consumer to make an informed choice. And that for us was really important. But obviously certain countries now, provenance is even more important than ever before. So if we can encourage our amazing producers to be able to tell their story about where their produce comes from, then hopefully our farmers and producers in this country can actually command a little better margin for it. And certainly, you know, we're finding people at Gloucestershire Business Show several years ago, there was a delegation that came over. I can't remember if it was India or China, it's so long ago, but I know they'd come over. A lot of them had holidayed here in Gloucestershire. They'd heard about Gloucester Old Spot, and they were desperate to get their hands on that particular rare breed pork, if you like. So I think that storytelling is so important, and certainly it's great for our economy in this country. If we can tell that story to get the extra margin, then I think that's great for us.
Thank you, Claire. Again, looking overseas, Manan, would you like to just comment on your view of the provenance of the food from the UK? You're on mute.
There's a good market that needs to be tapped into, because there's a lot of people who are now gone over the poverty line, and, you know, middle class is increasing and people want to try new things. And UK is known for quality, and I guess that's a reason, you know, why people want to go to buy product from the UK. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Guy, do you want to make any comment on this before we move on?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, all of the things about provenance and about audience, it's about getting the message across in the right way. You know, it's showing the root, and it can be showing the individual story behind a product as well, because a lot of people will love the way that something comes, you know, from the countryside in a certain part of the world to your plate, and how it gets there. And that's linked in with provenance, but it's also linked in with the human side as well. I think it's really, really important to show the way the whole thing combines, because it's of great interest to the end receiver.
Yeah, that's very true. In some experiences we've had in dealing with Singapore and selling meat into Singapore, the provenance of that meat and the branding was so important for it to be successful. And the development of that brand in Singapore is now moving quite well. Marcus, do you want to make any comment at all?
Yes, hi, thanks, Roger. Yeah, I think as far as the perception of British food is concerned, I'm speaking for Europe now, it is pretty good. So especially beef, lamb, pork, and other unique British foods or drinks like Scottish whiskey, that's just connected with the UK, and people there's demand for it. Yeah. It's unfortunately not easier to get it to the EU nowadays. So I think this is where the main problem lies, but we'll probably talk about this later.
Yeah. Thanks. Sam, any comment from you, and particularly from understanding from your members?
Yeah, a bit of a fascinating debate so far. There's lots of things I picked up on. I mean, Sandra was talking about the restaurant going culture. And I was thinking that in every British town, you'll find an Indian restaurant, a Chinese, a Thai, an Italian. But I wonder if you're abroad, whether you'd find a British restaurant. I don't know what it would serve. And I think what that tells you is that I think Britain in the food and drinks market is known more for its niche products and its quality products. Whiskey was mentioned, that's a very good one. But when you think how you're perceived abroad, what's one of the most successful television programs at the moment? It's something like Netflix, it's something like The Crown. People, when they think Britain, I mean, it's interesting that Sandra said immediately scone. That's what people want, I think. And I think I've discussed this with you before, Roger. I used to have meetings with Liam Fox when he was Department of International Trade, and he always said to me, never underestimate the power of the Union Jack on branding. And he would say that to every single company that was thinking of exporting, whether it was the food market or whether it was a washing machine. Put the Union Jack on, and that's generally perceived very well. So I think, you know, we've got to think niche, we've got to think quality. I think that's absolutely key, and you do have to tap into that cultural thing. So if people are watching The Crown, then make sure they're getting the Cotswolds, the Gloucestershire brand jams and things. It's a bit harder. We're doing this for the South Gloucestershire area. It's a bit harder to brand South Gloucestershire abroad, I think, but Bristol still means something. The Cotswolds means a lot abroad, I think. So when it comes to your food and your drink, make sure people know it's British and concentrate on quality. That's what I'd say.
Thank you, Sam. It's interesting to note, unfortunately our Indian colleague isn't on with us, but talking to him, the UK brand is favoured by Indian consumers as quite a strong brand. And what drives them onto that is actually the Union Jack, the London buses and the royal family. It's not necessarily the territory. And the provenance is actually a very strong USP for the UK product. And it provides a competitive advantage over many products imported into India in the food and drink side.
Roger, could I add one more comment to that?
Yeah, please.
Just based on what Sam just said, you are so spot on regarding The Crown. I mean, whether it's true or not, we all watch it. We all think there's some resemblance to what's going on or what has gone on in the past. But there is a huge push as well for British television, British comedies, you know, your sense of humor. I mean, Americans there's a channel in the US that's just doing All Creatures Great and Small from the 60s. So I think to your point, we are hungry for that kind of storytelling. And I think you have to combine it with the local vorism, you know, beyond farm to table. Now there's chefs that are actually going out in their garden preparing the food for you to have in a restaurant. But I think, you know, a whole panoply of British foods and things you're known for could really take off here. You need more push to do so.
Thank you, Sandra. Well, looking at what markets we might look at, I mean, the statistics tell us from DEFRA that Ireland is the biggest market we have. US is the second biggest and France is the third. What other markets might be around the globe that really we should be looking for in terms of possible export of food? Any comments on that, Steve?
Sorry, Roger, my Wi-Fi was distracting me doing this.
I was saying the current information from DEFRA and the Food and Drink Federation says that the markets that the Southwest Service in particular are Ireland, the United States and France. What other markets do you think we might consider?
I think we've kind of got the world at our feet, really, haven't we? Although not naively thinking that everybody's going to be interested in British. I think that given this kind of platform that this world that we now live in, I do a lot of purchasing actually on Amazon Australia because I have relatives out there. And it's quite interesting when you change the end of the, the .co.uk into the country that you want to shop in. And I feel like, although I keep mentioning Amazon today, and it's a bit of a monster of a supermarket, but I do think it is almost a way forward. Amazon Local as a supermarket online the other day. I thought it was a great way of bringing in independent retailers who have used those platforms to sell their produce and their goods, and actually they're now ending up in retail outlets that they wouldn't have ordinarily had because it was all online before. But I think we do have an opportunity to approach newer markets. I think we've become very reliant on buying from an awful lot of other markets, particularly China. Everything I touch says China on it, made in China. We need to perhaps go back to made in England, made in Britain or whatever, and really plug and own our own produce and be proud of it and push it out there more. I think we've got an opportunity to do that. Thanks, John.
Sam, any comments on that, where you think markets are? I mean, the UK government are pushing Australia, the UAE and India very much at the moment. And of course, Japan with the new agreement we have there.
I think Steve hit the nail on the head. There should be no barriers. I mean, clearly, I'm sure we'll talk about this. There are considerable barriers at the moment, as we know, as we're trying to get used to the new post-Brexit agreements. But there's that Union Jack carries a lot of weight. And funnily enough, talking about things like the Crown and the Royal Family, Commonwealth countries, there is a bind there, I think. So it's understandable why Australia, India, Canada are countries that we would target, but there's literally nowhere that we shouldn't get our product. I mean, there are certain things we talk about, the cultural things that people like about Britain. They do like a lot about heritage and stuff. So I don't think we should have we should have any barriers really. The only barriers are going to be the physical ones, and the online world has made that difference. I mean, Steve's point about I mean, my daughter's in New Zealand. I mean, I used to buy something for her in this country, take it to the post office. It cost a fortune. It would never arrive on time. Now I just order from the companies in their own country, and it's so quick and easy. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are tariffs around, and of course we are operating on WTO tariff systems, which perhaps doesn't necessarily give us a level playing field in some instances.
Roger, can I just come in on that and comment on something that Steve raised very eloquently, actually, which is he touched on the Amazon story, and I, like him, you look at Amazon as a sort of two-edged sword, really. I mean, it's a massive company, massive logistics situation, but actually it's extremely successful. I think we could learn an awful lot from that. And the idea of being able to click onto an Amazon site, albeit abroad, and actually order something and get it delivered, I think tells us an awful lot of where the barriers are, because that's easy. And they've made it easy, and that's the point. And you can go on to Amazon in this country and click on, if you're in the London codes, you can get fresh food and drink off the Amazon site. And you can get some ambient products off the main Amazon site in the UK. They make it really easy. We supply a whole range of products to Ocado, and that makes it really, really easy for consumers to buy. We've got to get over this situation where it is difficult to export. And it is difficult to export. Small producers find it incredibly difficult to, undertake the selling and the marketing of a product, and secondly, to actually put in place a decent supply chain which is reliable and can deal with the small quantities that they produce. And so buying on Amazon is a fantastic way of supplying small quantity, but also as a purchaser buying small quantity. And so they've overcome the main issue to exporting in an instant. And that's what we've got to get our heads around here, is we're going to really make a difference in terms of exports from this region. And I'm saying this region as a regional entity rather than one county, because I think that's important because it gives you scale. Then we have got to grapple with some of these issues to be able to deal with the supply chain.
Absolutely. I think we've got a question. Adrian, you have a question, I believe.
Hello. I just have a comment. I have been this week on in LATAC roadshow with Department of International Trade, and Latin America is really a very huge market, and sometimes some producers, some suppliers here don't know how to get there, and they are doing a really good connections there, with all the Latin American countries, especially Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and Brazil. That is the biggest one, and this is a good place to check for expansion, especially because our culture, we love import things. We love to try. We love to see if we speak most of us speak Spanish, and we like when the thing is in English, say, okay, this could be a really good thing just to try and just to make this comment.
Okay, thank you. Humphrey.
If I can just add Rena sort of support her on that, is that the DIT have now put in place a new support person for DIT in South America who speaks both Spanish and Portuguese fluently. They are putting the resources in to support British industry to be able to connect with industries in South America, as well as making sure that inward investment coming into the UK. So the DIT is really pushing forward with very skilled people to support companies. And I can see that around the world, Eastern Europe as well. They really are focusing on and supporting companies. And there is money available for small companies to take up to £7,000, I think, at the moment, just to have some marketing understanding of how to enter the market and support those small companies.
Thank you for that. Commenting on the market opportunities and the way that companies might get into the market, what sort of consideration should companies have to enter those markets, do you think? I mean, could we design a sort of checklist that gives them some guidance on the elements to consider? Sam, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think all guidance is very helpful, and I think it should be at every level, because there's so many businesses that haven't got involved at all in exporting. So you could make it as simple as you like, but the more detailed you are, the more need and support you're going to require. I think we can't get away from the fact, though, that this isn't a normal time. This isn't a normal discussion about import and export. Things dramatically changed as of January the 1st, and I think at the moment, and we've had this discussion before, Roger, I think to try and lure somebody into exporting is very hard at the moment, because all they see is negative press about Brexit and the post-Brexit deal. I think the last time we talked, Roger, I was saying to you that there hadn't been a lot of member queries about post-Brexit trading, but that has grown, I have to say, and grown is probably a good word, because a lot of people are finding it very, very difficult. So at the moment, I think we should, I was encouraged what Humphrey said about, the support in South America and the speakers. We need that. We need as much support as we can, but we also need the government to really sort of push the positives about, exporting, because at the moment it feels like a bit of a losing battle, because all we're hearing is negatives.
Guy, do you want to make any comment on that? You're on mute.
There we go. Yeah, I was listening to everyone's, and I was also in the background doing just a little bit of research as well. Everyone else has mentioned Amazon, so I think I will as well. We need to get more adept as exporters at using the platforms available to us. Everyone sells everything on Amazon. You can search for anything on Amazon. It's all about positioning as well. And it could well be that one of the best ways to get an awful lot of food manufacturers to actually be able to export is to have some sort of collective British food store where things are marketed and able to be searched for in an online format. It would also mean that if everyone is collectively doing that, then there is more of a bit of a team structure when it comes to regulation, when it comes to the rules and regulations that Sam alluded to as well. And interestingly, if you search British food on Amazon UK, obviously they started as a bookseller, so the first 10 or 15 things are on various different books, but the first edible product that appears on British food on Amazon UK today is actual cat food for British short hair cats, followed by turtle and terrapin food, which basically goes to show that if someone is searching for British food, they're not going to find anything at the moment. And that's something that I think from a marketing perspective and SEO perspective that people really need to address at their end as well.
Thank you, Guy. John, what sort of checklist would help you as a business to think about exporting? What would be some of the elements you'd be looking for?
if you look at the supply side, quality has to be, and it's already been mentioned this morning. We wouldn't put anything forward at all unless it had gone through our quality assessment procedures, because I think that is absolutely critical. It's got to be good and not, and I'm going to be, we're champions of local food or provenance-based foods as an organisation, but we have to be honest here that not every food that we produce in this region is of high quality. And we have to understand that out of 1,000 products that go through our assessment scheme every single year, about 25 to 30% of them don't even get an award. They don't even get onto the scale. So that tells you that not every single one would pass muster, and we can't honestly put something forward to the rest of the world as a marketplace unless we're happy with it and it's got that high quality tag. It's got to have stories attached to it, because otherwise the marketplace isn't even going to listen. It's all very well saying having the Union Jack, and I totally agree with that. That's why we changed our logo. In fact, it is very, very important to shout everything that's British. That's not being patriotic necessarily. It's just plain marketing sense. It's very, very important. But we've got to have the story attached to the Union Jack and those producers behind it, as well as the quality product. Looking outward the other way, from the producer's point of view, they're very interested in our members are very, very interested in exporting. There's no two ways about that. They are looking for new markets, especially now, and they've lost a lot of the domestic market. The problem is that they have no knowledge of how to access those markets. Knowledge is absolutely everything. Knowledge of processes, knowledge of the regulatory systems, knowledge of importers, who to go to, who to trust, who not to trust, perhaps. That's the area that we need to do a lot of work on. You can come up short. We came up short when we were looking at this recently, that unless you've got those processes in place, and it takes ages, and I think you're the first, Roger, to tell us all that be patient. It takes a long time to develop these markets. But we need those markers, we need that information, we need that knowledge looking outward.
Okay. Steve, any comment from you? Thank you, John.
Yeah, I'm kind of sticking with my kind of small, medium-sized business mind in terms of, I wrote down kind of some social media platforms. I don't think you realise, or people realise, if you've got like Etsy and Facebook and Instagram, you can buy products off those now, and you don't have to be in the UK to be on Facebook or Instagram or even Etsy, actually. And I think that we are exporting in a way with our people that are local to us, that are making. I've got a friend that lives around the corner who makes clothes, and she sells on Etsy, Facebook and Instagram, and she's forever sending shawls and scarves and things abroad. So quite naively, I think there's an element there of we're already exporting and we don't quite realise. I think it's on the larger scale where that tick list comes in terms of raising the profile of more monstrous quantities being sold. But I think we are selling and exporting without really realising in some ways.
Yeah, I think that's true. But taking your point, if you want sustainable business, do SMEs plan enough to look forward? I mean, you need a detailed plan. I mean, as we said, the market, there's 190 countries we can go to. Looking at a plan that is robust for that company in the long term. As I mentioned to John some time back, entering the international markets is a 3 to 5 year program. It's not instantaneous. If you're going to have it as a sustainable business. Culture, we need to look at the culture and the research. I think the research opportunities and where the information is significant. And then, of course, we come to the actual basis of exporting. I think, Marcus, you've got quite a lot of experience on exporting and importing into Europe, and the difficulties or the simplicities that used to bring about and now the difficulties it does bring about.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously, since Brexit, my role here is to be the spoilsport and tell people what's not possible. And I'm afraid, so if I come back to some of the suggestions, for instance, Amazon, yes, it is possible to export via Amazon and even to sell to consumers, but it's all different now. So you couldn't do that from the UK. If you ordered goods from the UK as a consumer, then you would need to, you get a notification by probably the forwarder who acts as an agent, then you need to pick it up from the customs place near where you live, and you need to pay the import VAT, maybe also tariffs. So, and these are hoops that people don't want to jump through. So basically a lot of e-commerce sales that was sent off from the UK to Europe are simply not being picked up and go back because consumers hadn't thought about this. So if you want to sell through Amazon, that is possible, but you need to be in the EU with your goods. So you need warehousing in the EU so you can supply your Amazon warehouses for, say, Amazon fulfillment by Amazon. And you would at least need a fiscal representative to do all the VAT invoicing and the VAT returns for you into all the jurisdictions you sell to, or to all the countries. Or you would need to establish a company in the EU, which would also allow you, for instance, for food to cover the labeling aspect of it, because you need to be in the EU in order to sell food in the EU, whether that's through an importer to whom you'd be dependent on that importer, obviously, or an agent, and you have to disclose all some of your sensitive business data, for instance, a list of your customer base, or you do it yourself by setting up in the EU. So these are the options, but it is in principle possible, and I'd say it is a good idea to, as far as pre-packaged food and drinks are concerned, to sell it via e-commerce.
Thanks, Marcus. Humphrey, any comment on? Sorry. Hello.
I think Marcus hit the nail on the head, because it's labeling, ensuring that you actually are your packaging of your product is labeled correctly, because language is one, making sure that there is no problem with language on the labeling, but two, from the point of view, as Marcus indicated, is the fact of registering of a company in Europe. You can't just go along and ask somebody to act on your behalf in the country. You have that person who's acting on your behalf has to be in that same product area. You can't just take anybody to become your distributor. So it's identifying those new, those people within the market to support you. The packaging, sometimes you think that the UK packaging is great and you then put it onto the market. Certain countries have problems with, especially in France, you have to register your labeling mark in France, and recycling. In Germany specifically, the Green Dot program. If you go to California in America, they have different labeling and requirements for packaging than different states within America. So you have to be very selective on what you're doing. So again, back to somebody mentioned about research. Research is critical, but also don't leave that sort of thing to the last moment. I think a lot of CEOs want to go into a market and forget about the little bits of data information which is required, the whole transit process. So, who are you going to use as your importer? I know a company called Granny Goffard's down in Somerset who sells ice cream to the Middle East. They have a wonderful business there, but it took them 2 or 3 years to set that up. And it's an amazing product being sold into the Middle East, high-end ice cream. And it's well worth looking at if people want to see how they did it.
So making the point, do your research, identify where you want to go and research in absolute detail. As Sandra, in terms of the US, what sort of research might one do on food and drink over there?
Well, I've been dying to talk about this because because to move into the positive side of things, and I know there's so much challenge, there's so many challenges to do with post-Brexit, but I'm working for an organization in the United States, a company in the United States called Grubhub, and I recommend that you go to their site. It is an online delivery service. We have a few in the United States, DoorDash, you probably have Uber Eats, but Grubhub is unique because they are tied to restaurants. So they're very supportive of restaurants, you know, in the local city. They're actually running a campaign. For those of you that don't know it, this is International Women's Month. They're doing a project which they started 4 years ago called Restaurant Her, H-E-R. And so they're supporting women-owned restaurants, restaurants owned by women of color especially. This is a big campaign with lots of marketing and push toward it. But my point for this conversation is that it is tied to local restaurants. And I think my many visits to the UK, you know, you've got this huge asset of these fabulous restaurants that focus on, you know, the British cuisine, the good parts of it. And it seems to me that part of the, what Clara started with provenance, I mean, it's already, you've got sort of people interested in promoting the great food and cuisine of the UK. So, you know, align with other organizations that get it out to the public. And I think that in the US, I mean, it's not the export idea that many of you are talking about legally. And so forgive my ignorance about that part, but I'm just saying Grubhub is a great example of really promoting restaurants and the food they sell and how they sell it. And you know, the quality, in this case, you know, the women-owned restaurants, I mean, they have themes every month to do something with restaurants. And I think, you know, the more that's out on social media in the UK about what you're doing, the better, you know, get the word out. I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah, I think the point is there is opportunity, significant opportunity outside the EU, and that's where we really need to help the SMEs to move in their direction. We've already had the comment about doing the research outside the EU. I've mentioned that there are certainly 4 territories which are being focused by the EU, by the government. What else do we need to do? Claire, looking at holding people's hands and making sure we hold people and encourage SMEs through the process. What's your thought on that?
Well, obviously, a lot of the people that we work with Happily tend to be the farmers, the growers, the producers in our rural communities. And that's one of our greatest challenges often, is that they are in a separate bubble. And if you ever ask them, do they go to the Chamber of Commerce for help, or even probably more likely to come to you, Sam, than they are to some of the chambers, because of the smaller sort of mentality, if you like. We're talking micro businesses as well as SMEs. But I did want just to share a little story with you, because I just wanted to say that there's another angle. And my daughter's been living in Dubai, and one of our small micro cheese manufacturers in the Southwest had actually collaborated. And I think that's a really important thing for us to think about these joint opportunities. There was a pizza company in Dubai that used their cheese from this small cheese factory in the Southwest, well, farm. And because of the storytelling and putting that cheese onto the pizza, the pizzas are flying out there. Because if you go into Dubai, as I did when I saw my daughter recently, provenance and knowing where their food is coming from is really important. So there's a massive market in UAE, certainly, and a desire to know more about what they're eating. So it's not just about taking packaged products and selling it abroad. There are some collaborative opportunities as well.
Very important point. Guy, you wanted to make a point, I believe.
Yeah, it was kind of like about the research side of things, and the fact that an awful lot of SMEs, if they're wanting to look at a new market, they're running their current markets at the moment, their current business at the moment. A lot of them don't have the time to take and they don't have the resource, and they don't have the money to buy the resource to look into new markets as well. So what I'd really want to know in the future, as we move not away from Brexit, but as we move further afield from Brexit, is how much collective research or how much centralized research there will be able to be supplied to people. Oh, I'm interested in exporting food to Dubai, for instance, or to Thailand, for instance. What are the pitfalls? What do I need to know? If there was all of this centralized research for them to start off with, and then they can start to look at their own particular food produce in detail, it would be incredibly helpful. I don't know whether we'll ever get that going, or even if something like that exists at the moment.
Part of it exists through DEFRA. DEFRA have got a very wide base of information, and so has the Food and Drink Federation. Obviously DIT helps in that direction as well. When you get down to looking at the markets you're going into, though, experience suggests you need to get down to detail and to understand. So maybe your idea is to have a broad base of information, and then the company can start distilling it down themselves once they've got some idea how that information comes together.
Yeah, and then it can, for certain companies, give them an early decision whether that country that they're looking at is viable or not, you know, rather than going a long way down the research line and finding, oh, there's a big pitfall here that if we'd known about at the start, we wouldn't have even started to consider it, and we would have gone to different regions and to different markets.
Mm-hmm. Sam, have you got any comment on that at all?
Sorry, no, I thought what Guy said was very interesting, actually. But I know I was just thinking, actually, about whether the COVID has changed the way we see these things. I mean, we can all, in theory, buy a house by looking at all things online, but you really don't get a true feel for it unless you go and see it and actually look at the neighbourhoods like and get to know the people. And I wonder if a lot of businesses are kind of, who might be an export, are kind of waiting a little bit until they can actually visit places, because it's one thing to get head knowledge, it's one thing to get the sort of knowledge that you can pick up on the internet, but I think sometimes you've actually got to go physically meet people abroad, get a feel for things. So I think that's we're missing that at the moment. And online is wonderful. Look, we're having this meeting now. Sandra's calling in from America at an unearthly hour, and we can do that. But if I wanted to go and trade in America, if I wanted to get a feel for the American market, what the competition's like and so forth, then I think I'd need to be there. But I think Claire's point about Dubai was really interesting as well. And I think one of the key ways to getting SMEs interested is to make have case studies like that. So if you've got a group of farmers or people involved in the cheese industry, you get that person in front of them who's trading in Dubai. I'm sorry, it means far more than getting somebody from DIT, you know, a professional in that. It shouldn't, but it does. We need role models that we can understand, and that guy or lady who's selling to Dubai will let somebody in that audience sit and think, hello, I can see this. So I think that's my message. Will always be to people who set up events. Don't just have a panel of experts. If you're talking about, say, the cheese market, make sure that panel includes people who sell cheese and have sold cheese successfully. So I think that's really important.
Thank you, Sam. I think we're at the stage really where we've identified, certainly to do the research, explore the market, and deal with people who've actually done the deed, as it were. They got into the market, they understand the market, as you said, Sam, and hold people's hands through the process. I think maybe we could publicise a small document that we might be able to circulate, Sam, to give you some sort of route to put before your members that might just assist them. I've taken some notes here, and I'll put something together and circulate it to the panel. We talked about getting into them. What are the strengths and weaknesses of our local producers who are looking, local businesses who are looking to get into these markets? What sort of strengths do we have from that point of view? Sam, any views on that?
Just talking again, I apologise, I tend to be mainly working with the micro organisations, you know, smaller guys. They don't even have often the basic marketing skills. So they are so brilliant at producing their fantastic cheese or so brilliant at producing their amazing cider. They're so small, they can't actually afford to employ somebody to do their marketing for them. And they just don't know which way to go. So they don't often know how to market within the UK, let alone with making that quantum leap to marketing abroad. So it's baby steps. It's how we upskill them to that first stage to understand even what marketing is, and then take them to the next stage. So when you're talking to them about their brand identity and labeling legislation and what have you, they kind of look at you blankly as like a rabbit in headlights. So, you know, and if you say to them, have you had advice? Have you thought about going to the growth hub? Or, you know, often push them to FSB or to the chambers. Again, rabbit in headlights. They just don't know which way to go or where to go. And as I said, it's a real challenge in our rural communities. And I think organisations like NFU could possibly do a bit more hand holding and actually signpost to FSB or DTI or whatever, so that at least it's in their vision, because at the moment they're just focused on making their cheese and not thinking and taking the blinkers off. And John, I'll shut up now and hand over to you because you've got more experience than I have.
You were doing a good job, Claire.
Yes, very much.
I think in terms of strengths and weaknesses, I think it's quite clear. Strengths, we've got authenticity, we've got quality, we've got provenance, we've got integrity in the supply chain. And from our point of view, we can now add a consolidated supply chain at this end that actually can repalletize small caseloads into pallet sizes for pushing out of this region. Weaknesses, though, is that we have not got the resource in the region at individual business level to be able to go after these markets, do the marketing, do the research, but also put then those consignments together and make it work. So somebody mentioned, I think it was Humphrey mentioned the Granny Gothard story. It's a fantastic story. A lot of hard work's gone into that. A lot of hard work's gone into that. If she was here on this panel now, she would wax lyrical about all the pluses and the minuses that she's had to go through over the last 3 or 4 years in order to get to the stage that she has got to now. What I think we need to do as a region is actually be a bit bolder than that, picking up on Claire's point. And I think we ought to develop a regional strategy to answer some of these issues around resource, particularly. It's not just about the having literally people in place to undertake that research and to undertake the supply chain development. It's actually bodies. It's actually, we need that kind of resource, expertise, but we need that on behalf of the region. We need a concerted effort, and to say as a region, actually, we're going to look at 2 or 3 world markets and probably pick one to start with and go for it. And whatever that market is wanting, where the gaps are, we can actually supply the gaps with suitable products from this region. Get that in place, move on to the next market and build these bridgeheads abroad. Could be one in the UAE, could be one in India, could be one in Singapore and one in America. You know, you can build this if we've got a strategy. We've got no strategy in this region to actually market collectively, collaboratively, food and drink products outwards. It's left to individual small businesses, and that's where the problem is, because they have not got the resource. And I think actually one of the things I would like to see, is why I've got involved with this, if I'm brutally honest, is that we can play a role with that at Taste of the West, and we'd like to put that forward as an idea to help build and direct that strategy. But we do not have the answers, we do not have the resources, we do not have the expertise. And looking around this panel here, there's a lot of expertise on this panel. Why don't we get together in a very practical way, as if it was one business, pool our resources, pool our collaborative efforts, and let's get out there, post-Brexit era, it's going to take 3 or 4 years before we get any real traction, but let's start now, develop the strategy, have some objectives of who we're going to go to, and develop those supply chains. Surely it's worked on individual businesses, as we've heard already this morning, some fantastic examples. If it can work on an individual business where they have put the resource in, surely we can do it collaboratively.
Thank you, John. Good idea. Sam, what are your feelings about that?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Muted. Yeah, I think Claire and John answered that brilliantly, really. I thought it was really good. And the word I wrote down was collaboration. And in my experience, nobody understands and promotes collaboration as well as Claire. She's brilliant at it, so she could coordinate it all. But no, I think coming back to the point about if we take that particular subject again, the cheese person who invents it, blessed are the cheesemakers, for anyone who knows the reference from that movie. Nobody who sets up a cheese business goes into it because they want to do the finance or the marketing. They do it because they love cheese, and that's what their skill is. But then they suddenly realize, hang on a minute, how do I get this into shops? How do I get this into different markets? So you do need experts. I said earlier we didn't need a panel full of experts to advise a cheesemaker, but that's where the experts come in. We know about the market, we know what we can do with it, and if we don't, we know someone that can. So very often, if I get queries that are way out of what I can deal with, I can generally point people in the right direction, hopefully. And I think that's what we need to do, and that's where collaboration comes in. So I think what John and Claire said was absolutely spot on. I think all the strengths John identified were absolutely true, and the weaknesses are just the understandable weaknesses. Whether you're making cheese or whether you're an engineer who's just fascinated by a piece of engineering, that's what drew you to that business, not how do I trade in India. That is the byproduct, but then you suddenly realize you're really, really out of your comfort zone. So like all of us, when we're out of our comfort zone, that's when we need support. And if there was a central place for support, brilliant. So collaboration, I wrote it down, underlined it twice. So that's definitely the key word, I think.
So I think after following our meetings, maybe that's something we can pick up as a group to establish how we can develop that collaboration, etc. But Claire, thank you for the idea, and for you, Sam, as well as John. Guy, you had a comment.
Only that, yeah, because if we centralise and if we have that sort of body, then we will be able to do more of the in-depth research that's needed for particular markets, make that centralised and give that to members and to people who are looking at various different markets as well. So it's going to help, because one of the issues, alluded to by Sam there, cheesemakers like to make cheese. They're not accountants. They have an accountant for that. They're not an expert, if there is such a phrase, because they need someone to be able to guide them through the pitfalls on that as well.
Thank you, Guy. Sandra, did you want to make any comments on that at all? Looking into what we're talking about.
I really, I know some of you better than others on this particular panel, but the new collaborations that are forming around the globe right now regarding food and drink or any other business opportunity, they must include an ecosystem of players. So as smart as all of you are, I think, really key to get some of those farmers involved, some of the individuals that have small restaurants or shops. I think what's happened is that we often sort of understand or think we understand what people want and how they want to make it happen, but yet we don't really involve all of the players. So I also am a fan, because of my business, of city leaders. Get some of the people that are in politics in your communities, because they have influence and they can be another sounding board for you. I feel like that collaboration is everything now, and I advocate for new coalitions that include more of the ecosystem. I'll just mention one other thing while I'm talking, which is that you probably know the 10 top restaurants in Bristol, or the restaurants that have sort of a famous name for themselves in a community, and there's always sort of a listing of the top restaurants, the top places to eat, that if you want to get cheese from Gloucestershire. Here's where you go for it in the United States. But I think the really smart restaurateurs that are constantly still in business, 30% of our restaurant industry has either closed temporarily or permanently in the US. This is a huge number. But the restaurants that are still in business are doing an incredible job of social media. You know, they have weekly emails to me from restaurants that I patronize. You know, come for, you know, a special Italian cuisine this week. They are on social media every day, promoting things, promoting their chefs, talking about, you know, their safety procedures re-COVID. So I think there's a restaurant here in Washington. If you come, I'll take you there. It's called Iriki, and the owner is Christiane Ricci, and she is really just such a smart marketing person. So I think those marketing skills, as you've all pointed out, are critical. You just have to, you know, constantly think about how do people relate to my restaurant? Will they come back when it's possible to eat indoors again? So, and that's happening in the US. So I recommend that.
Thank you, Sandra. Steve, you may have to leave us shortly. Any comments you want to make? I mean, it seems to me that cooperation and forming some mechanism to bring about an understanding of at the strategic level on exporting is ideal.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been made quite clear this morning in terms of that collaborative approach, and certainly working together to emphasize everything that's on offer on a larger scale. From Gloucestershire's perspective, just to plug a little bit of what we're up to, it's really important to mention that collaborative working is something that we've desperately been trying to achieve through the recovery planning period over the last year. And at Visit Gloucestershire, I've shared a link from our website about community, and it's not just about individual businesses trying to work in isolation. I really want for food and drink for people who are local and have a product and have a service to be able to work in a partnership, in a collaborative way, that they're not on their own and in isolation. I really want us to bounce back stronger and have a platform to be able to build from together. So if we could echo the Together Gloucestershire message, and that includes our South Gloucestershire friends in that too. I think it's really important that we work with people like John and others all around the country to really get ourselves on the map and have a showcase of everything that's on offer. And then, as John said, work out how we can get those products onto into a world where the palette can have everything on it. It doesn't have to be one product. It can be a mix to get it from A to B. But I think we need to work strengthening numbers as opposed to in isolation. And on that note, I need to rush.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Okay, talk to you later.
Thanks.
Yes,
bye.
Right, lost. Okay, I think perhaps now we should maybe revert back to a bit of Brexit to understand what's happening in the region on Brexit. Sam, what's the sort of attitude? When we spoke about a month ago, it was very much the early days of Brexit and the concern of your members. How have things developed? And then perhaps we can talk to Marcus and so forth.
Yeah, well, it did feel when we talked before that, you know, it was early days and people were thinking about it. But as I saw described at the weekend in the Times, I think it was, we're now wondering whether teething problems is actually a toothache. And this is actually a problem that's going to last because I've had a few queries and they're getting very, very technical. It's not like top line level about how do I do this. It's people who are really struggling. I've had people asking me about issues to do with VAT, about finding overseas representatives, all kind of quite detailed stuff. And it's proving quite scary for a lot of people there. And also delays. People are saying that, you know, my customers aren't getting stuff because of all the delays that are being caused, unexpected extra money when it's arrived if you're importing something. And there's also a little bit of a sense that perhaps the government is, I wouldn't say turning a blind eye to it, but obviously with COVID, we're all talked about the budget yesterday. It's no longer their number one priority. They've achieved what they wanted to do politically, but they're now the actual reality's moved on. They're carrying on with the politics, but businesses are having to pick up the pieces. So people like Marcus and Humphrey will have seen this probably more close hand than I am, but the calls I'm getting aren't very encouraging, to be honest, and they are getting very, and what worries me, and I think I said this before, Roger, is the perception that the export market is just, because every one of these businesses will talk to their friends and will say, oh, it's a nightmare trying to trade with blah, blah, blah. Nothing makes you think, well, I'm not getting involved in that more than hearing a fellow competitive company struggling. So not a pretty picture at the moment. So is it teething troubles or is it toothache?
And are you seeing companies walking away from the European market in that direction, or?
I'm not sure if they're walking away, but there are people saying that they can't keep this going for much longer. And in fact, I had a call as well from somebody last week who's in the eel industry, would you believe? Now, they don't actually trade in Europe. Most of their trade is with the Far East, and it's very successful. Eels in Gloucester, a very big thing. And they're having a nightmare at the moment. And they think that DEFRA are so concentrating on things to do with Brexit and so forth that trade beyond the Brexit borders is a problem as well. So it's a nasty picture at the moment. But I'm just hoping that, you know, it's going to calm down. But Humphrey and Marcus particularly may know better.
Well, there are 190 other markets around, so, you know, maybe, as we said, if we can get some collaboration going, we can start to encourage them to look at the other markets. But in the meantime, Humphrey, what's your view on the comments being made?
Well, I was going to just say, I think the perception of Europe is it's the EU, but actually perception of Europe is there's 27 nations. And I think it's that is the big difference. It is, we're not part of Europe, or we've now left Europe. We've actually left 27 nations behind, and 27 nations are also trying to work with the UK as a single entity. And that's the other issue where if you ship to France, it's sometimes different to ship to Croatia because of we're next door to France, so therefore it's just across the channel. But then you're now having to pay for what is called transit documents. They could add another £60 to your shipment, or up to £120, because you require what is called T1 documentation. So there are these extra charges which people weren't aware of at the time when we left on January the 1st. I think we as professionals knew, but the individual company didn't realise all these extra costs were coming in. So that's affected their bottom line. I've probably handled, I think it's over 65 separate inquiries since January the 1st, from the simple thing as how to raise an invoice, which in most people's eyes is quite simple, but actually we are now a third nation. It's all the extra information you require on there, such as Incoterms, which is the delivery terms process. People thought they were trading with Europe on DDP basis, which is basically delivered duty paid. But that's not an area where you should be working to. You should be working on DAP terms, or else you're going to have VAT implications in Europe, which was Marcus was alluding to earlier on. There are certain products where you've had EU products delivered to the UK, and now you're delivering them back to a single entity in Europe, and some of those products are now dutable. And people can't understand why that is happening. So there's a lot of explanation still having to go on in teaching companies basically back to basics of how to trade with 27 separate nations of Europe. It's the same way as you're trading with Japan, you're now trading with, as I said earlier on, 27 separate nations, and understanding the rules and regulations under sometimes those individual countries.
Yeah, it's the same as trading with the US, isn't it? There's all the states are separate entities. Marcus?
Yes. I can only strongly agree with what Humphrey said and also Sam earlier. So to condense what Brexit means for business, it certainly does not mean taking back control. It means losing control. So the take back control thing is only concerned as far as the government can now deregulate as they want, which is the whole point of Brexit, but it doesn't help smaller and medium-sized businesses at all. And what Humphrey said regarding the EU being not a single bloc, but in fact consisting of 27 different nations is also a thing that's often perceived wrongly. Not only that you have different laws on top of EU law in every jurisdiction, you have different consumer habits. So if I think, I'm originally from Germany, so if I think all the countries that are bordering Germany have a different cuisine, yeah, they eat different things, maybe slightly different things, but anyway different, and there's a different demand for certain kinds of food. And that's another thing to consider. And also something that Humphrey said about the terms of importing. I think on one hand, you want to make it easier for yourself to export to Europe. On the other hand, the easier you make it for yourself, the more difficult you make it for your clients and the less attractive you get. Already UK companies are looking for supply chains that are in the EU and rather not choose UK exporters because it's just too much hassle. Yeah. So for that reason, for marketing reason, really the maximum obligations should be with the seller in the UK rather than the importer. But these are technical things that can be done. Yeah, as I said, either fiscal representation or establishing a company in the EU. That's all possible. Obviously, you need to have a substantial size of business in order to do that and to have the resources. On the whole, that all sounds very negative, what I'm saying now regarding export to the EU. But don't be afraid to export, because it is once you've found a way of doing it, to marketing your products and a way of importing the goods through with the help of the right kind of partners, because you can't do it yourself, then it is still well worth it to export. And the suggestions made in this round earlier, I thought they were brilliant. Yeah, by everybody, by Claire, by Sam, by John. I thought they were really good ideas, from marketing products by smaller manufacturers who, by the nature of it, are not interested in marketing but in making their cheese or having their kettle or whatever, to getting the goods to different markets. And I think that's a brilliant idea, and I can only encourage businesses to do that. But you do need professional partners to help you out, definitely.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcus. Sam, is there anything we can do to help people in the Gloucester and Southwest region who are exporting into Europe? Any guidance that we could suggest via the likes of Marcus and Humphrey?
I think just making sure that people know there are people that can help them, and they're not, just the whole thing about Brexit, we've just got to get away from that politics. Now, this is the reality. We've got to sort of live with it. So we just need as many people as we can with expertise. And it comes back to the point we were saying earlier, success stories. We and maybe it's the nature of the job really, but I tend to hear from people who are having problems. I'm not hearing from people who may be trading very well. So if we all discover them, we should keep them, and we may be able to say to someone, look, this company, that they had a similar issue, this is how they dealt with it, perhaps you want to talk to them. So it's about finding good examples of people that are succeeding at the moment, and then passing that around really, and just kind of supporting each other, because you're right, you can't do it on your own. Marcus's point is absolutely right, and I think if you try, you'll fall flat on your face and you'll walk away. So we just need to sort of make sure people know there is help for them, there is support, and just to sort of move on as much as you can from the whole politics and stuff that we've seen that's dominated our lives, and just get back to trading, because there's big markets out there. And as we come out of COVID, people are going to want to start getting the business moving again. And you can't just concentrate on the British Isles. You've got the whole world to play with. So believe really.
Just to come in there, Roger, if I may, I think the COVID has suffered. COVID is suffering with. Sorry. Let's start again. The HMRC and government bodies are suffering because of COVID dramatically. There's so much more pressure on people are now understanding about special provisions, such as bringing goods in under inward processing, so they can actually process the products and don't have to pay duty and VAT. There are a number of applications going through with the application process to the department responsible for IP or OP. Those departments are suffering because those people are working from home. They're not in the offices at the present time. So the government is slow in reacting and not processing these facilities for UK companies. And therefore, UK companies are becoming frustrated at the fact the government's not responding, but they have to take in the fact that it is COVID. And the government, I think, is going to be sympathetic to the processes. They will support the companies to ensure that these special provisions will help UK businesses. I know one company in Tewkesbury area which has taken a big contract to do something which they weren't expecting from a company in Ireland. And suddenly they've had to go through the application process. They're still waiting back from the central department for that. But they're getting positive responses from the government agencies. That's what I'm saying. And I think the government will be supporting British industry. They do not want British industry to fail. It's UK PLC. They do not want it to fail. So therefore they will support, but you also have to do it by the book.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Humphrey. Just to comment on that, in the comparison, we're talking about examples. In exporting meat to Singapore and to China, some of that is coming out of the southwest. On the face of it, it seems far simpler than actually going currently into the EU. That's my experience at the moment. The regulations going into Singapore were quite simple. It may well be, it would be good to circulate this as a case study for people to understand. But dealing internationally, companies should take the long haul approach, but it is not that difficult once you get, as we said, once you get the right people around the table to understand what those opportunities are, what the rules and regulations are, and the simplicity if they're adopted properly. If you adopt them properly, going into Singapore, we never had any issues at all with the meat going in. Flew it in by sea on 2 occasions as well, and it was quite a simple process. Whereas listening to the EU situation at the moment, is it true that there's more complication and misunderstanding about what is, or lack of understanding of what is required? Is that the situation, Humphrey?
Well, you've got the situation where one vet used the wrong wet stamp because it was the wrong colour ink. Now, that is a crazy situation whereby that would never happen in sending goods to, as you said, Singapore, because people traded with Singapore, they understand the regulations, etc. That's where I think there's a slight difference from people who've traded on before to the rest of the world and now trading with the EU, with the regulatory authorities within the European Union, them not understanding. I'll give you an example, very quick one, whereby we had a trade agreement with the EU, which physically said you had to have an invoice declaration to show that those goods were UK origin. The words were UK to be put on the bottom of the invoice, UK origin goods. There were two or three countries within Europe who did not recognize that as being UK. They said it should have been GB origin because they had misinformation. And this is crazy. This is customs officers within Europe did not understand the free trade agreement. So that's where I think in the last 3 months, things are now easing. People are now understanding what color ink to use, what decoration is the correct decoration, etc. Vets are now in place to support, to do the stamping, etc. There are more and more customs procedure companies who are able to do your customs decorations. Still, it's still under resourced, but still there are more and more companies coming to the fore to support companies in doing import declarations. So I think in the next 6 months, there'll be positives. And I think that maybe that's one of the reasons why the government put this postponed VAT accounting and also the simplified procedures declarations in place, is to help businesses. I think postponed VAT accounting is going to go on. It won't stop. It's going to, I think it will be on for a number of years. So no deferment account is required. You just do it through your VAT return. So there are lots of positives, I believe, going forward.
Okay. Marcus.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, again, I share Humphrey's comment on it will get easier as people go on and learn how to export. And I guess there are many examples for using the wrong ink and so on and so on. But the main thing is you can also import into Europe without paying any VAT at all. That is possible. So you can defer VAT, and by the time you should have paid it, you can offset it to your VAT your VAT return. But the goods for the solution we provide, the goods must enter the EU via the Netherlands. That's important. And then again, you have two choices of either picking a fiscal representation or opening or setting up your own company. So that is already possible. I think on the whole, a few things will become easier because processes will be streamlined and people learn what processes what processes to use. And on the other hand, the relationship between the UK and the EU will remain difficult. So you probably read the news today that there was a unilateral decision by the UK to postpone the import agreement for Northern Ireland. So that's not going to help at all. And there will be more of this. So yet I still think it's very important to export to the EU. But all I'm saying is you really need to look at the detail of how to do it. And there will be grace periods up. The first one is beginning of next month, and the one after that is beginning of July. So businesses need to look at what's changing there also, but that's mainly for import.
Thank you, Marcus. John, any suggestion on how we can help companies to navigate this as well?
Well, I from what I'm hearing from some of our member businesses and what I've heard even around the table this morning, this is not going to go away. This is certainly not a teething problem. It is. I think tooth decay, I think, is probably how I would probably describe it. It underlines, though, for me, what we've been talking about. If it isn't going to go away in the short term, it will go away in the long term. It will settle. It will get better getting products into the EU. It'll have to. EU is a massive trading block for us, and it's as a country, and we need that trading block. We need that to be working well, but it's obviously going to go through some very, very painful weeks and months ahead. But for me, that underlines the issue. While we try and help those individual businesses to overcome some of the technical details and problems that are around exporting to Europe, I think we need to think further ahead. I think this group needs to think further ahead, and the idea of developing a strategy, a global strategy for food exports from the Southwest, I think underlines or is a reason for us to be able to look broader than just the EU. That's a classic case where had we been looking ahead 5-10 years ago to a global market through a region-wide strategy, we would be less reliant perhaps on one of our markets, i.e. the EU, failing, which is what's happening at the moment. And I think that we owe it to industry to actually start right now developing that worldwide strategy from this region, so that this doesn't happen again. I mean, it's a classic case of all your eggs in one basket, isn't it? And we've got all our eggs in the EU basket as a marketplace, and it's failing for whatever different reasons, political reasons or whatever. It will get right in the distant future, but we need to start now. For me, it underlines that whole imperative of looking much broader.
Thank you, John. Any other questions from anybody? Any comments? I think what I would say is that the group so far, the panel so far, have come out, I think, with a strategy statement that we need to develop through collaboration for the region. And I think, John, that's the key issue. And maybe away from this meeting, we can meet again with Claire, yourself, John, and with Sam, as well as some other inputs, I think, to try and see if we can develop the thinking around this strategy. So are there any other comments from anybody?
I would welcome that. I think, Roger, I think that's exactly the right approach. That's why I mentioned it earlier on. I think that we can't solve this. An individual business can't solve this. We can't solve this by looking very narrowly. This has to be a broad brush approach, and it has to pool the resources that, frankly, individual businesses have not got access to in order to make this work. There's lots of different elements here. There's lots of different resources that we've got just around this table, let alone out there. But I think it needs to start somewhere. DIT are helpful to a point, but we need to pull those resources as well when it's appropriate to do so. But this is only going to work if it's a business-led strategy. It's not going to work if it's a government-led strategy, because that's not what governments are set up to do. It has to be from bottom up to make this work. And I think as a collaboration, I think we've got the perfect vehicle here around this table to make this work.
Good. Thank you, John.
Just one comment. I think totally agree with John. Absolutely. I think we need to move into the 80-20 rule. 80% of businesses are not looked after by DIT or government. 20% of businesses are. We need to move into the 20%. So we then get the full support of government, because we come big, we come part, we're being listened to. They will support us. Whereas I think the government approaches a lot, and this is where Claire came in, where she's supporting micro businesses. They don't get us. They're not talked to by government agencies. They're not listened to. And I think this is where Sam through the SSB has the government ear, because it is a big organisation who represents a lot of industries and businesses. I think, taking John's point, we need to become one of the 20%, and then government will start listening to us as a group and support us going forward.
Fair comment. Thank you, Humphrey. I can see you nodding, Sam.
Yeah, totally 100%. I think it's so important. You've got to get on the radar, and maybe exporters have been off the radar for obvious reasons, but it'll come back, because I think Humphrey made the point that this is a key factor in part of Britain PLC, and we are going to need the economy to bounce back dramatically, and we're not going to be able to do that without good exports.
Right. Well, I think our time is basically up. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your inputs. I think, again, it was a very interesting discussion. I think out of this discussion, I think we need to have some follow-ups, and you'll be hearing from me in the very near future. So thank you very much for your time and your support. Thank you again.
Roger.
Bye all. Bye.
Bye all.
Thank you for getting up early, Sandra.
Absolutely. Thank you.